When President Trump came into power for the second time, he had a number of natural supporters and allies. Some were aligned with him personally, many naturally allied to the United States and its role in the world. This week, it became very starkly obvious that Trump has burned through nearly, not quite all of those supporters and allies and provoked them to turn actively against him. Trump is very fond of saying that things he does will be like nobody ever saw before, and usually that's garbage, but on this occasion he has taken esteem and goodwill and truly indisputably burned through it, leaving no trace, like nobody ever saw before. And everybody's saying so. And while it's been the dedicated work of his second term, it really hit the heights this week when he established his blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Let's start with the international fracture and work our way from there, and to do so with Trump's strongest allies in Europe. Because nearly all of Europe was on side when he started, allies of the United States historically, prepared to fight alongside the US historically, seriously, geopolitically allies. Most of them thought Trump was a bit of an idiot, to be fair, but they were willing to flatter him and give him all sorts of recognition in order to see that alliance continue. But two leaders in Europe particularly were also seen as allies in spirit. One of them, of course, was Viktor Orbán. Well, Orbán never left Trump, but the Hungarian people certainly did. Trump's endorsement of Orbán went side by side with his declining popularity. Not the cause of it, but certainly turned out not to be an asset. Orbán never abandoned Trump, but as soon as Orbán lost his election so catastrophically, Trump has, at the point of shooting this video, said nothing. He was asked by journalists how he felt about the result. He turned away without saying anything. Trump doesn't like losers, so it is said, which is weird when you look at who he chose to be in his cabinet. But I digress. The other one, a right-wing populist, but also at the time of shooting this video, and notwithstanding a recent referendum defeat, also successful and relatively popular, Italy's Georgia Meloni. But Meloni has also been very clear about, for example, the danger posed by Putin's Russia, a staunch ally for Ukraine. Whereas Viktor Orbán worked on behalf of Putin to undermine Europe, she came in, she worked pragmatically and to most eyes pretty shrewdly to become one of the most effective of the current crop of European leadership. This week, even she called Trump unacceptable, and Donald Trump howled like a wounded chimpanzee, as we've come to expect. Meloni turned on Trump because he's deeply unpopular amongst the Italian public, as he is across Europe. Italy, like the rest of the world, has been negatively impacted by Trump's illegal war in Iran. That action led her to distance herself from him, and Italy joined the 40-country coalition led by the UK and France, and excluding the United States, to work out how to deal with the fallout. And then Trump attacked the Pope. The Pope, he said, was weak on crime, terrible for foreign policy, a total loser. He should have been lining up, he suggested, to support Trump's war on Iran, to be cheerleading behind Pete Hegseth's public prayer for the mighty Jesus to smash the teeth of America's enemies. That led to the unacceptable label for Meloni. She said this: "The Pope is the head of the Catholic Church, and it is right and normal for him to call for peace and to condemn every form of war." You'd think the President of Peace would know that. But then that label is so last year, at least until the next time the Nobel Peace Prize is in the offing. Meloni is a politician of the right, has been engaged with a degree of populism, but... and I recall the days when this would have been damning with faint praise, but she has not been a fellow traveller in post-truth politics in the sort of vein of MAGA. So yes, Putin's Russia invaded Ukraine, Greenland cannot be taken over by Trump, and the Pope is gonna call for peace, even when it's Donald Trump who's waging war. And so in 1 week, pretty much, Trump lost both of his best allies in Europe. as well as all those institutional allies. They've been organising to get around Trump's America rather than to support it. I mentioned the 40-country coalition, including countries that started Trump's second term believing themselves to be allied, but after a year of insults, of tariffs, bullying and more insults, they have increasingly started to publicly stand up to him. The UK, formerly America's best ally, but increasingly, in Keir Starmer's understated words, fed up of Trump's insults and his impact on the economy of the UK and the well-being of its citizens. Plus, France, Germany, Italy, Canada, Japan, UAE, Spain, many others who counted themselves as American allies a year ago. When Trump began a naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, every one of them refused to join in. MAGA diehards railed on social media how these so-called allies weren't worthy of true American greatness, yada yada yada. But basic social rules apply here. If you find, over a period of time, everyone turns against you, sooner or later, you should consider the possibility. It's you that's the problem, not everyone else. Meanwhile, leaders who stand up to Trump generally do well. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney this week finally passed the threshold to get a majority in Parliament, thanks to winning 3 by-elections and also attracting a number of Conservatives to cross the floor to join his government. It's the first time in Canadian history that a minority government became a majority via floor crossers, 5 MPs since November, plus by-elections. But Canadians remain outraged at Trump's actions and the impact that his behaviour has had on their lives, and quietly but firmly standing up to him has simply been seen as being in the national interest. Still, Trump does still have one loyal friend in Europe. That would be NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. He recently met Trump at the White House to endure what was reported to be a tirade of insults from Trump, all about NATO providing virtually no assistance to him in the war against Iran, as though such an alliance is something to be demanded as of right, even though you didn't consult with people in advance or indeed do anything much except constantly insult and try to extort them. Rutte put the best face he could on it, but in doing so he is seen as increasingly isolated from the European leaders who have abandoned this sort of ingratiating approach to a large extent. Even the populists in Europe are distancing themselves, something that will only accelerate now in the wake of Viktor Orbán's massive rout in Hungary. Trump's best buddy in the UK, Nigel Farage of the former MAGA-light Reform Party. He built his brand on his friendship with Trump, heading off to Mar-a-Lago at the drop of a hat, speaking at Trump's election rallies, courting Elon Musk back in the days when he was strongly part of the same mission. But now, well, Trump is so unpopular in the UK, he has been backpedaling furiously, saying that Trump's threats against Iran were, quote, going way too far, which is a polite British phrase for batshit crazy. I'm here to translate for you. You're welcome. On Ukraine, he said he would, quote, not be 100% with Trump's position, because it would make Putin a winner, which is an English way of saying exactly the same thing as the last thing. You no longer see Farage promoting pictures of him alongside Trump. One of his biggest assets just turned into a massive liability. And so it has been for the AfD in Germany and the National Rally in France, so it is for all the right-wing populists across the continent. Trump's former allies in spirit, who were delighted to get his attention and support, now pretending, well, they never liked him anyway. And that's something that Donald Trump should get used to. Once he's no longer in power, the world and the United States particularly will be chock full of people who swear they never supported him, always saw him for what he was. Some are ahead of the others, that's all. One of the important components of Trump's base in the US has been the Christian communities, so you would think he would cultivate them. And he sort of tries to, so long as it doesn't mean he has to read the Bible or go to church, because, that's a bit high maintenance when he could be at the golf course. But then he goes out of his way to outrage them by, again, picking a fight with the Pope, expressed in as juvenile terms as every other fight that he picks with somebody, to stand in contrast with the dignity of the object of his attack, who simply replied, I have no fear of the Trump administration, or speaking out loudly of the message of the gospel. And then Trump immediately followed it up with, of course, now famous Trumpy Jesus, posting this picture on social media. And you can ask, what was more disrespectful? Posting what his religious base clearly saw as a blasphemous picture, or then trying to gaslight them by claiming that he didn't see the picture like that at all. It's just a picture of him as a doctor, healing people with glowing hands and stuff. An excuse that doesn't even help, because if somebody really did look at this picture and not see the Jesus reference, you would have to ask if they had the judgment or experience to be allowed on the street without a carer, let alone be in charge of the country. But of course it's nonsense, shouldn't be given the slightest credence. Various Catholic groups decided likewise. They have been amongst Trump's most enduring and patient supporters, but they started to draw the line at this, calling it gross blasphemy. That's not the only part of his domestic support that is now having buyer's remorse. In the election, he successfully bolted on the Make America Healthy Again movement to his own, putting Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in to run that side of government and pretty much leaving him alone to get on with it, at least for a year. Except Trump still responded to requests for favours from the big corporate sector, because that's where the money is. So he signed off on protecting and promoting the widely used herbicide glyphosate, which had been a particular target for the MAHA movement for the best part of a decade. And as the midterm elections approach, he has been pushing back because RFK Jr.'s anti-vax tendencies are proving not to be that popular amongst one particularly selfish group of Americans, the ones who don't want to die early from easily preventable diseases. I know, what losers, but there it is. As a result, while some are still holding on because RFK Jr. is still there, a lot of them have become disillusioned and are likely to be reluctant to show up for the next time of asking. Add them to some of the other core supporters that Trump had in the last election, American farmers, who are suffering enormously from tariffs and the effects of the Iran war, Hispanics and white young men, originally attracted by the message that here was someone who cared about their struggling position in modern society, becoming deeply disillusioned by the focus on everything but. So, why is it that Trump is turning all of the people across all of the world against him? Well, because people are learning that doing exactly what Trump asks you to gains you no credit whatsoever. The fact you did it won't be remembered for 2 seconds in the future, and you'll be insulted and attacked just the same. People are learning that whatever your situation, however you might be impacted by a course of action, it wins you no consultation or consideration in Trump taking actions that are massively going to harm you or the people you represent. And all those rules of the game, the rules on trade, geopolitics, the rules of international law, the things that made it possible for you to thrive and survive, they are being dismantled. And it's a reckless action of self-harm. And the tempo of people turning against Trump has accelerated in the last few weeks because the scale of the chaos multiplied with the war on Iran. Trump is now single-handedly making everybody's life harder and more miserable, not just in Minnesota, not just in America, across the world. They've seen him assassinating Iran's leaders, devastating their economy, destroying their infrastructure, and since Greenland was in the crosshairs, they're wondering whether they might even be next. And added to that, they look at the country that used to be the leader of the free world, and they see the astonishing self-serving, the corruption, the democratic backsliding, and they know this is not what they ever signed up to support. MAGA conservatives are fond of blowing stuff up in their political advertisements. Someone should do one where they line them all up. America's international alliances, boom! MAGA international populist movements, boom! Happy to see that one go, personally. All the categories of voters who previously supported them, boom! At the end of the ad, there's just a bunch of empty cartridges on the floor, wreckage has been strewn everywhere, and there's one guy left laughing maniacally in the middle of it all. The good news is that then the camera pans out and you can see a whole crowd of people staring at the crazy guy, muttering to each other about how they need to get him away from the firing range.